This is the Washington Times front page for Wednesday, March 29th, 2023. Thanks for joining us. I'm George Gerbo. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy is working to unify Republicans around a slate of proposals to cut spending and balance the budget before he enters negotiations with President Biden about raising the debt ceiling. Harris Alec reports McCarthy wants concessions from the White House before raising the limit. The president has ruled out any cuts and insisted on a clean debt ceiling hike. The problem for McCarthy is that three factions of House Republicans are seeking to make their imprint on the budget with competing sets of spending cuts. They all agree, though, on recouping the $90.5 billion in unspent COVID-19 relief. The president's firm stance promises to push the negotiation ever closer to the deadline expected in mid-August. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas faced calls to resign during congressional testimony as he insisted that the southern U.S. border was secure. Stephen Dinan reports animosity ran high as Mayorkas testified to the Senate Judiciary Committee, where some Republicans peppered him with questions about what has gone wrong over the past 2 years. Mayorkas called the line of questions revolting and said he wouldn't dignify them with a response. He also claimed the administration has operational control of the border, at least according to his own definition. The parents of the Nashville school shooter said the 28-year-old hid multiple firearms from them and was being treated for an emotional disorder. Matt Delaney and Carrie Pickett report the shooter had legally purchased 7 guns from various local stores. Metropolitan Nashville Police Chief John Drake said 3 of the guns were used to kill 6 people indiscriminately at the school, including 3 9-year-old students. Drake said his department would have tried to take away the guns if officers caught wind of the shooter's intentions, but he said, as it stands, we had absolutely no idea who this person was. You can read all of these stories at WashingtonTimes.com/front page. You can also find the entire lineup of Washington Times podcasts at WashingtonTimes.com/podcasts. North Korea has released photos of what appear to be its first lower-yield tactical nuclear warheads. Guy Taylor and Andrew Salmon report the regime of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has long claimed to have tactical nuclear weapons, but hasn't previously shown them in public or released photos of them. North Korea is also engaged in a string of missile tests to protest major U.S. and South Korean military exercises. The heavy publicity given to the nuclear arms is heightening fears that the country is moving closer to its first field test of a nuclear weapon since 2017. Speaking of missile tests, Russia test-fired 2 anti-ship missiles into the Sea of Japan days after Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida visited Ukraine. The Kremlin announced 2 Russian boats fired 2 projectiles at mock targets 62 miles away during drills in the Sea of Japan. According to the Moscow Times, the missiles were cruise missiles, which can travel at 3 times the speed of sound and have a range of more than 100 miles. The missile tests come following the flight of 2 nuclear-capable Russian strategic bombers over the Sea of Japan last week, further raising tensions in the region. And finally, experts told a congressional committee that the United States failed to evaluate the harm of lost learning versus COVID-19 when it closed schools during the pandemic and fell behind Europe in getting children back into the classroom. Tom Howell reports epidemiologist Tracy Beth Hogue told the House Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Pandemic that American children are falling behind in academic achievement and school absenteeism rates due to actions during the pandemic. Witnesses said school leaders knew early on that COVID-19 deaths overwhelmingly involved the elderly and that the virus posed a low risk to young people, but they feared political consequences from labor unions who put teachers' demands first. Find all today's front page stories at WashingtonTimes.com/front page or on the Washington Times app, and find us wherever you get your podcasts. Just search Washington Times in any major podcast app. You can also find us on Twitter and Instagram at Wash Times for breaking news, sports, commentary, and more. For the Washington Times, I'm George Gerbo.